Guys, welcome you all. This is Shakti from Shakti Academy. Please like our video and share. Don't forget to subscribe our channel. Press bell icon so that you could get updated videos of our channel. Right? Hello everyone. The Rebel 1857. So previously we have discussed about that how did the mutiny begin and the line of communication that the people used to travel from one village to village for sharing the message about the 57 and about the leaders who were had led the groups, especially like Rani Lakshmi Boy, Nana Sahib and Wasjid Ali Shah and the old Mughal king, etc. Right? Then after that, the rumors and why did the people were believe in the rumors and etc. So the things we have discussed in part one. In part two, we are going to discuss about the award in Revolt. Right? So the first one is that the cherry that will drop into our mouth one day. So here a cherry is nothing but here a cherry described the award and our mouth described that one day the British people will annex the city of Awadh, right? So in 1851, what Governor General Dalhousie described about the kingdom Awadh is nothing but a cherry that will drop into our mouth one day. You note it down. This is important, right? In 1857, when Lord Dalhousie was the Governor General of the subcontinent, he described about the city of Awadh is as a cherry that will drop into our mouth one day, right? So after that, 5 years later in 1856, the kingdom was formally annexed by the British Empire. So previously we have discussed that in 1801 itself the annexation of the Awadh had happened, but formally completely it was annexed on 1856, right? So once the British people annexed the Awadh, then they started introducing the subsidiary alliances had been imposed on the city of Awadh in 1801, right? So in the subsidiary alliance, what does the subsidiary alliance is speaking about is nothing but in the term of this subsidiary alliance, the Nawabs as well as the Rajas had to disband their military forces, right? So previously we have discussed that the Nawabs and the Rajas had some military soldiers for their security as well as for the collecting the revenues, etc., right? So but after the subsidiary alliances had been imposed on Awadh in 1801, now according to this term of this subsidiary alliance, the the Nawabs as well as the Rajas had to disband their military forces, right? So this allowed the British to position their troops within the kingdoms and the act of the accordance with the advice of the British resident who was now to be attached to the court and deprived of his armed forces, right? So this disbandment of the military forces of these Nawab and the Rajas is lost their powers and the strength and everything, and even now they were in the position to work under the British, right? So after that, most probably these Nawab became increasingly dependent on the British, maintain the law order with the kingdom, right? So he could no longer assert the control over the rebellious chiefs and the Gladars. So once the rights as well as the strength had been disbanded by the British of the Nawabs and etc. So often after the disbanded of the military forces and the plug out the powers and everything, here Nawabs as well as the Rajas are totally dependent on the British, right? So in the meantime, the British became increasingly interested in acquiring the territory of Awadh, right? So why here the British is concentrated on annexation of the Awadh is nothing but here there is a one big important thing is that this Awadh, I mean the soil of the Awadh is good as well as it's a good production for the indigo and cotton cultivation. So about this indigo and cotton cultivation that you have studied in grade 8, okay? So that's what here the soil of the Awadh is good for producing the indigo and cotton cultivation. So that's what here the British concentrate on the annexing the Awadh, right? So after that, the regions was ideally located to be developed into the principal markets of Upper India by the early 1850s. Moreover, all the major areas of India had been conquered, the Maratha lands. Yes. So once the Awadh was conquered by the British after 1850s, moreover, most probably the major parts of the Indian had been conquered by the British, like the Maratha lands, the Doab and the Carnatic, the Punjab and the Bengal. All the places were being annexed by the British, right? So then the takeover of Awadh in 1856 was expected to complete with the process of territorial annexation that had begun with the conquest of Bengal almost a century later, right? So after that, the Awadh takeover happened in 1856, and the annexation begins everywhere in India, especially like Bengal and the other famous cities, which is useful for the easy trade and the transport and other things, right? So next one is the life was gone out of the body. So the life was gone out of the body is nothing but this is a quote which was written by a Nawab, I mean maybe a soldier or Nawab, right? It's about Wasjid Ali Shah who was been the Nawab of the city Awadh, right? So here Lord Dalhousie's annexation created dissatisfaction in all the areas and the principalities that were annexed, but nowhere more so than in the kingdom of Awadh in the hearts of North India. So here after the annexation of Awadh by Lord Dalhousie, this annexation of Awadh created the dissatisfaction of all the people as well as the king, I mean the local princes, kings and the Nawabs, peasants and the landlords, everybody is hot in the North India, right? So here Nawab Wasjid Ali Shah was dethroned and exiled to Calcutta on the plea that the region was being misgoverned, right? So why did here Nawab Wasjid Ali Shah had been dethroned from his kingship is nothing but British people thought that this administration of Wasjid Ali Shah being misgoverned, and he is not a good man to do the administration of the city Awadh. So that's why here Wasjid Ali Shah had been dethroned. But actually the reason was not like that. Here the British people wanted the land of soil, I mean wanted the land of soil for cultivating the indigo and cotton, right? So after that, the British government also wrongly assumed that Wasjid Ali Shah was an unpopular ruler. But initially, as you know that if a Nawab of one city, he has plenty of powers around the villages, especially the cities, all the people are very famous. But here the British wrongly assumed that Wasjid Ali Shah doesn't have any popular power and etc. But on the contrary, he had widely loved, and when he left his beloved Lucknow, there were many who followed him all the way to Kanpur singing song of lament, right? So once he had dethroned from his kingship, then all the people as well as the followers of Wasjid Ali Shah started to follow him with singing the song to Kanpur with the lament, right? You know meaning of the lament, right? So the widespread sense of the grapes and the loss at the Nawab's exile was recorded by many contemporary observers, and so loss of the power of Wasjid Ali Shah. Here many contemporary poets as well as the historians had observed, and in one of them were noted about this annexation of Awadh is nothing but the life was gone out of the body, and the body of this town had been lifeless, right? So the life was gone out of the body is nothing but here the king was gone out of the city, but still the city is there, but the city is living without life, which means the lifeless, okay? So there was no street, no market, and no house which did not wail out the cry of agony in the separation of Jani Alam, and one folk song demanded that the honorable English came and took the country. So here one song had been prepared by the Indians, right, that the honorable English came and took the country. So it was one of the mourning song which was prepared by the people of Awadh, right? Then this emotional upheaval was aggravated by immediate material losses, and the removal of Nawab led to the dissolution of the courts and its culture, and there's a whole range of the people, musicians, dancers, poets, artisans, and cooks, retainers, administrative officials, and so on lost their livelihood. So here the annexation of Awadh, so here you know that the Lucknow, Awadh, Banaras, Patna, right? So here this is the city of Awadh, right? So the annexation of Awadh by the Lord Dalhousie is not only dethroned the kingship of Wasjid Ali Shah, but also it dissolved the courts and the people's cultures, as well as it destroyed the people's livelihood of musicians, the dancers, poets, artisans, cooks, retainers, administrative officials, and others, okay? So the next one is about the Frankie Raj and the end of World War. So do you know the meaning of Frankie Raj? Here the literally the meaning of the word Frank is nothing but when the British people were ruling India, no? So these people were known as Franks, which means the white people, no? So here the white people rules, as well as how did the world end come to an end, right? So this revolt in Awadh, as well as the chain of grievances in Awadh linked many Dagladas and the peasants and the shepherds, and they had started identifying this British rule in the different ways, right? So here after that we know that after the revolt started, the Indian shepherds, they started attacking the British officials, like schools, offices, and the company office, etc. Right? So this became a big revolt, even in Awadh and other cities. So after that, the revolt became an more expression, as well as it became popular even in the village, right? So after that, this annexation displaced not just the Nawab, which means this annexation of the Awadh not only displaced the Wasjid Ali Shah, but also it disposed the Dagladas of the region, right? So here Dagladas of the region, why the British people not only removed Nawabs but also the Dagladas of the region is nothing but here initially the countryside of Awadh was dotted with the estates and the forts of Dagladas who for many generations had controlled the lands and powers in the countryside. So once the British people annexed Awadh and they dethroned the kingship of Wasjid Ali Shah, then after that they started concentrating on to destroy the Dagladas who were who were being the owners of the estates and the forts for many generations, but now everything come to an end, which means all the powers and the controls are taken over by the British, right? So before the coming of the British, Dagladas maintained the armed readiness, built forts, and they enjoyed the degrees of autonomy as long as they accepted the suzerainty of the Nawab and the paid revenue of the Tughlaqs, right? So before the arrival of the British and before the annexation of the Awadh, these Dagladas enjoyed lots and lots, which means they have maintained the armed army forces, and they started building the forts for their enjoyments, and they have some powers, and they were ruling as a king in a particular region, but after that everything had been destroyed. So you know that here some of the bigger Dagladas had been many as 12,000 foot soldiers. I mean, some of the big Dagladas may have owned 12,000 soldiers, and some of the smaller ones were being about 200 soldiers, right? So these everything come to an end after the annexation of Awadh. So the British were unwilling to tolerate the power of the Dagladas. Immediately after the annexation, the Dagladas were disarmed and their forts destroyed, right? So these annexation, why this annexation had happened is nothing but these British people got jealous on these Dagladas, which means they were owning more than 12,000 and the 2,200 soldiers under them. So this power was not liked, not tolerated by the British. So that's what immediately after the annexation of Awadh, they have destroyed the Dagladas, as well as they destroyed the forts which was built by the Dagladas, right? So after this, the British land revenue policies further determined the position and authority of the Dagladas. After the annexation, the British power revenue settlement is known as Summary Settlement of 1856. Note on that, after the annexation of Awadh, the first British revenue settlement was known as Summary Settlement of 1856, right? So here, why did the British impose the Summary Settlement of 1856 is nothing but to destroy Dagladas. So in which way they have destroyed the Dagladas is nothing but this settlement was based on the assumption that the Dagladas were interloper with no permanent stakes in the land. They had established their whole over land through the force and the fraud, and the summary settlement proceeded to remove the Dagladas wherever possible. So here the settlement, under the summary settlement of 1856, the position of the Dagladas had been stolen, taken away by the British, right? So in whatever maybe they were in the post, like collecting the taxes and administration and other things. Here the Summary Settlement Act destroyed the Dalits post in wherever it's possible. So after that, the figure shows that, you know, that the pre-British times Dalits had held 60% of the total number of villages in Awadh, right? So before the arrival of the British, most probably these Dalits were owning 60% of the 60% of the villages in Awadh. But after this Summer Settlement Act 1856, this 60% had been reduced into 38%, right? So these Dalits of southern Awadh were hardest hit, and some lost more than half of the total number of the villages and they had previously held, right? So not only they have lost the percentage of the villages, but also they have lost the powers, and here total they have most probably they lost more than half of the number of the villages that they have previously hold, right? So after this, the British land revenue officers believed that by removing the Dalits, they would be settle the land with the actual owners of the soil, and thus reduce the level of exploitation of the peasants while increasing the revenue returns of the state, right? So here the main reason for destroying the Dalits is nothing but, so officially the British people thought, the British land revenue officers thought that if we remove the Dalits from their post, then the land will be given to the peasants who were being the owners of the land in the previous days, and so that we could control the level of exploitation of the peasants, so that they could pay the taxes frequently to the British, so that the revenue of the state will be increased. But actually, according to their thought, nothing had happened about this Summary Settlement Act. So see, but this did not happen in a practice. Revenue flows of the states increased, but the burden of the demand and the peasants did not decline. Officials soon found that the large area of Awadh were actually heavily overseas. To increase the revenue demand, in some places were been 30 to 70%. So after the lands had been taken control of the British, which means after they annexed from their Dalits and the Nawabs, their land revenue demand has been increased up to 30 to 70%. So this the increasing of the 30 to 70% here, some of the peasants were not happy with this annexation. After that, they were suffered the lots and lots for payback their revenue collections, right? So this disposition of the Dalits mean the breakdown of an entire social order. So this divides the loyalty and the patronage that bound the peasants to the Dalits were disrupted. So pre-British times, the Dalits were oppressor, but many of them also appeared to generous father figures, right? So after the annexation of the lands of the Dalits, the total cultures as well as the social order has been destroyed. And previously, before the arrival of the British, even these Dalits were the opposers of the many of them. But now what happened? By the generous, it happened everything, and all British people all made these Dalits became the beggars, right? So these exacted the variety of dues from the peasants, but were often considered in times of needs. Now under the British, the peasants was directly exposed to an over assessment of the revenue and inflexible methods of collection, and there was no longer any guarantee that in times of hardship or crop failure of the revenue demand of the state would be reduced or collected postponed, or that in times of festivities the peasants would get the loan and to support the Dalits are earlier provided, right? So here previously we have discussed that this land revenue has been the revenue demand has been raised up to 30 to 70%. So that here some of the peasants couldn't pay back their taxes, as well as they have suffered and lots. And during the sometimes during like in time of a festival and other times, these loans had been postponed, and so that here some of the peasants used to get the loan from the Dalits to pay back to the British, right? So here in some areas like Awadh during 1857, so these fights against the British had been losing, as well as here the fighting was being carried by the Dalits and the peasants with the angry of the British. Here many of the Dalukdas were been loyal to the Nawab of Awadh, and they joined Begum Hazar. Here Begum Hazar Mahal is the wife of Nawab Wajid Ali Shah, and in Lucknow to fight the British. So previously you know that this most probably when the Nawab was ruling in Awadh, that time they were very loyal to the Nawab. So since they were being loyal to Nawal, that's what they have joined in the group of Begum Hazrat Mahal to fight against the British in Lucknow, right? So after that, these grievances of the peasants were carried over into the Sepoy lines. Into vast majority of the Sepoys were recruited from the villages of Awadh, and after that, yes. So after that, many villages. I mean, you know that many soldiers were being recruited for the East India Company, and here most probably these village soldiers from Awadh, and as well as most probably these soldiers were being getting complained of the low level pay for their duty, and it's difficult to getting a leave once we appointed as a Sepoy, right? So these reasons became very discontent to all the people, and after that they expect the relationship with the superior white officers that significant change in the producing the years of 1857. So in which way the white officers, I mean the superior white officers had a relationship with the Sepoys is nothing but in 1820s the white officers made a point to maintain the friendly relationship with the Sepoys. So in 1820s itself the white officers planned to maintain the friendly relationship with the Sepoys, like playing with them during the leisure time, and wrestle with them, and they were used to go for hawking stalls and other things, right? So here as we know that many of them were fluent in Hindustani, which means they were in Indian sepoys, and most probably they were from the Brahmin family, as well as their custom and the culture of the country is totally different, right? So but this same relationship with the white officers and the sepoys did not last for a long. In 1840 this began to change, which means these officers developed the sense of the superiority, which means they have some dignity, so they cannot go friendly with the sepoys, which means they were in the higher position. So in how will the higher position, how will the higher authority will go friendly to the sepoys? So this became big changes in the Indian sepoys, so that you know that this may be a reason for the violence, as well as the episode of Mangal Bande may be the classical example of this incident, right? So after that you know that as I told you that the large majority of the sepoys of the Bengal army were being recruited from the villages of Awadh, and especially eastern Uttar Pradesh, and many of them were Brahmins, and from the upper caste. Awadh was in fact called the nursery of the Bengal army. Note down. So Awadh was called as a nursery of the Bengal army, right? So here why Awadh called as a nursery of the Bengal army is nothing but most probably 90% of the soldiers were from Awadh, and they were from Brahmins or upper caste, so that they were here the city of Awadh called as a nursery of the Bengal army, right? So after that the changes that the families of the sepoys saw around them, and the threats they have opposite were quickly transmitted on the sepoy lines. In the turns, the fear of the sepoys about the new cartridges, the grievances about their leave, their grows about their increasing the misbehavior of the racial abuse of the part of their white officers were communicated back to the villages, and the link between the sepoys and the rural world had important implication in the course of the uprising, when the sepoys defied their superior officers and took up the arms that were joined very swiftly to by their brethren in the villages. Everywhere peasants poured into the towns and joined the soldiers and the ordinary people of the towns in collective acts of rebellion, right? So after that the changes of the higher authorities made a big changes in the Indian sepoy, among the Indian sepoys, and that became transmitted in transmitted the fear among the sepoys, that the use of new cartridges which was graced with the fats of cows and pigs, and after that the communication with the white officers and the distance, as well as the link between the white officers and the sepoys. These all the changes became big changes, and these all became the reason for reason for the revolt in 1857 in all the subcontinent, right? So the next one is about what the rebel wanted. So as you know that what the rebel wanted is nothing but the sepoys wanted a freedom from the British people, and they wanted to give a full stop to the rule of the British, right? So here, how did the British people recorded their revolt 1857 is nothing but here they have recorded with their own trial, as well as they have shown their heroism of attacking these people and everybody. So finally here they recorded the people as a barbaric people. So barbaric people is nothing but the cruel people that they have ever seen, right? So here after that the many voices had been come to stop the rebels, but here finally the British took some cruel steps to stop the rebel, right? So after that here, why these Indian shepherds did not record these rebel as their victory is nothing but, as you know, that most probably the organizer of the rebel was shepherds, as well as they were from the ordinary families, and most of them were not literate, right? So this was the reason why they did not record anything about this rebel, right? So even though when they have got a notification, even though they were illiterate, but they have organized the meeting in a good manner, and they have passed the message from one village to another village in the secret manner. So soon they have organized both men and women in the places of Awadh and other places to oppose the British, right? So after that, actually here we do not know, actually we do not have the much of the throw lights of the perspective of the rebels attempt to reconstruct what happened in 1857, and thus heavily and inevitably dependent on what the British wrote. So here initially we do not know that what had the British written about the rebel 1857, but these sources of the official information is telling about that this rebel became an unsuccessful of these Indian shepherds, which means the British got the victory of 1857, right? So here the vision of unity, as you know that here the most probably all the shepherds and all the people in the village started attacking the white people in 1857, and here the rebel proclamation of the rebel is nothing but all the people are started attacking the white people irrespective of their caste and creeds, right? So initially most probably the Muslim princes were started organizing the meetings, and especially the leaders like the wife of Wasjid Ali Shah and other Nawabs, etc., right? So even though these Hindus also put their contribution to support these Muslim princes to fight against the British, right? So after that new proclamation had been issued under the name of Bahadur Shah Jafar, who was the last Mughal king who had been prisoned in the Red Fort, Delhi, right? So what was this proclamation is telling about is nothing but this proclamation of this Bahadur Shah is telling that the people to join the fight under the standards of both Muhammad and Mahavir. It was remarkable that during the uprising, religious divisions between the Hindu and Muslim were hardly noticeable despite the British attempt to create such divisions, right? So here this proclamation which issued under the name of Bahadur Shah is telling the people that both Muhammad and Mahavir, right? Both Muhammad, he is nothing but the god of the Muslims, and Mahavir is the god of the Hindus. All should join together to fight against the British, and we want to destroy the divisions like Hindus and Muslim, which means we all should gather together to join our hands to fight against the British, and soon we wanted to send off the British away from their country, right? So after that, in December 1857, the British spent 50,000 rupees, right? 50,000 rupees to incite the Hindu population against the Muslim. As you know that the Hindu incite is nothing but to tempting the people to speak wrongly against the one group, right? So here, but initially the British people spent 50,000 rupees to incite the Hindu population against the Muslims to make the fight with these two parties of Hindus and Muslim, but initially this attempt have been failed. Next one is against the against the symbol of oppression, right? So against the symbol of oppression, which was the symbol of oppression is nothing but previously we have discussed that the new proclamation has been issued under the name of Bahadur Shah Jafar, right? So this proclamation completely rejected everything associated with the British rule, or Frankie Raj as they were called it, right? So the proclamation of this Bahadur Shah Jafar has been refused by all the people since it was ruling by the British, as well as the Frankie Raj, which we people are usually called it as, right? So that's what all the people were started neglecting as well as the rejecting the proclamation, and they condemned the British for annexation they had carried out of their treaties that they had broken, and the British rebel leaders said could not be trusted. So after that, the British rebel leaders said that we could not trust this proclamation, which means the British people are ruling now, but so that they could change anything and everything when they wanted to change, right? So after that, here the one thing is what enraged the people was how British land revenue settlements had disposed landlords, both big and small foreign commerce, had been drained the weavers to ruin, right? So after that, the next one thing is roaming among the people is not how did the British land revenue settlement had dethroned all the landlords of both big and small, as well as this foreign commerce, the arrival of foreign commerce destroyed the artisans, weavers to ruin, right? So this become angry of the Indian people as well as the Shapai, and they started attacking the Frankies, I mean the white people started attacking the white peoples, and they started attacking their houses, government offices and other things, right? So after that, this proclamation expressed the widespread of the fear among the British, and the British people started destroying the caste system as well as caste system and the religious of Hindu and Muslim, and converting them into Christianity, right? So after this proclamation, the British people got fear that, and they started involving that, and they gave a permission to all the Christianity missionary to spread their community to all over the India. So through that, the British people are started to destroy the caste and the cultural religious of Hindu and Muslim, and soon they made all the people to convert into Christianity, right? So this fear that led the people to believe in the rumors that circulated at the time, so that this incident of this British will make the people to believe the rumors, all the rumors, so that here all the people wanted to save their livelihood, so that they started fight against the British, right? So this fight is happen only for they saving their livelihood and their faith, honor and their identity, so which means these are the things are made the people to fight against the British, right? So as noticed earlier, in many places the rebellion against the British widened into an attack on all those who were seen as allies of the British or local oppressor. Often the rebels deliberately sought to humiliate the allies of the cities. In villages, they burnt account books and they ransacked the moneylenders' houses, right? So here after that, these peasants as well as the shepherds started attacking all the people, even in the villages, especially they started started burning their account books of the zamindars, and they started attacking the moneylenders and other people, right? So why these people were attacking the moneylenders and the zamindars is nothing but previously these moneylenders and the zamindars were loyal to the British, so that's what they may be the spies of their British to ruin the peasants and other people, right? So this reflected an attempt to overturn the traditional hierarchies, rebel against all oppressor. It presented glimpses of an alternative vision, perhaps of a more egalitarian society. Such were not being articulated in the proclamation, which sought to unify all the social groups to fight against the Frankie Raj, right? So this introduction of the rebel in Meerut started spreading all the places, and the social attempt became overturned, which means the people started believing the rumors, and all the people became the oppressor of the British, and new system of the British to destroy the caste and the new acts of the revenue settlements and everything. They made the people be angry, and these people all started to be unified, and they started attacking the Frankie Raj, right? So on the search of alternative power, once the British rule had collapsed, the rebels in the places like Delhi, Lucknow, and Kanpur tried to establish some kind of the structure of authority and administration, right? So once the British, and I mean once the rebels started and the people sent off the British away from the cities like Lucknow, Delhi, Kanpur, and here as soon as the people started to establish the new authority of administration, but this was a of course short-lived, but attempt showed that rebel leadership wanted to restore the pre-British world of the 18th century. The leaders went back to their culture of the court. Appointments were made to the various posts, arrangements made for the collection of land revenues and the payments of the troops, order issued to stop loot and plunder. Side-by-side plans were made to fight the battle against the British. So once the British people sent, once the people sent the British people away from the cities, as soon as these leaders, rebel leaders wanted to restore their pre-British, which means when they were ruling in the 18th century, so the same way they wanted to consolidated their power once again, and soon they have gone to their courts and they have made a new appointments and arrangements of collecting the revenues and stop the looting and the plundering the crops and other things, and soon the new plans were made, and as well as the once again, one side the administration work was going, another side the revenue collection, and another side the side by side the plan was made to fight against the British, right? So the chain of commands were laid down in the army. In all this, the rebels hacked back to the 18th century Mughal world, a world that became a symbol of all that they have been lost, right? So after the annexation, once again the Awadh, all the rulers were started eagerly to fight with the British, and again as soon as this chain of command, which means the administration and the powers of Indian went back, and all the people are started to go back to the 18th century Mughal world, which means when the Mughal were ruling the same way they wanted to rule, that's what they have gone back to their cultures and everything. After that, the new administration structure has been established by the rebels, were primarily aimed at the meetings the demands of the war, and accordingly demands of the war, the new administration policies had been introduced, and moreover in most cases these structures could not survive the British onslaught, but in Awadh where resistance to the British lasted longest, plans to counter attack were being drawn by the Lucknow court, and the hierarchies of the command were placed in the late as the last months of 1857 and the early part of 1858. So after that, with the structures as well as with the demand of this war against the British, the new plans were being made by these rulers who were being ruled the pre-British, and after that the new demands and the surviving of the British onslaught, and the people new plans were being established to attack the British, as well as the places of Lucknow court and other places, the commands, the military commands as well as the other things that had been introduced in the yearly of 1857, the part of the 1858. Repression is nothing but how did the British, especially the white people, stop the rebels, and what are the measures they have taken to stop the rebel completely everywhere in India, right? So as you know that before the sending out the troops to conquer North India, the British passed a series of laws to help them quell an insurgency by the number of acts passed in May and June 1857, right? So before the sending out the troops to conquer the North India, the British introduced the number of laws to help the people, those who are going to save the places like Awadh, Kanpur and Lucknow, as well as the number of new acts as well as the new rules has been passed, especially in the month of May and June in 1857, right? So here the British not only passed the new acts for getting back the North India, but also they have passed the new act for the material law, but the military officers and the even ordinary Briton were given the power to try to punish Indians suspected of rebellion, right? So here not only the powers has been given to the military officers to punish the Indian sepoys who were being suspected of the rebellion, but also the ordinary Britain, right? The ordinary Englishmen also got the power for punishing the Indians whoever been suspected of rebellion, right? So in other words, the ordinary process of laws and the trials were suspended, and it was put out that rebellion would have only one punishment, death, right? So after that, after the ordinary Englishmen got the permission to punish the Indian shepherds who were being suspected of the rebellion, and after that the new punishment were being introduced, that only one punishment if anybody found that he will be involved in the rebel. That punishment is nothing but death, no any other option, right? So after that, armed with these newly enacted special laws and the reinforcement brought in from Britain, the British began the task suppressing the revolt. They the rebels recognized by the symbolic value of Delhi. The British thus mounted the two patronage attack. So after that, simply in the side by side, the British started planning to get back the cities of Calcutta and Lucknow, Kanpur, whatever they have lost to the Indian sepoys. They started to get back from their sepoys with the new plans. So here, according to these records, the British started the two attack, right? The British started two attack. So one force moved from Calcutta into the North India. That's the first attack. One force moved from Calcutta into North India is the first attack of British, and the second attack is from Punjab, right? Second attack is from Punjab. So which was largely peaceful to conquer Delhi, right? So the British attempt to recover Delhi began in the earliest June 1857. So as I told you that the British had taken two important measurements to attack the Indian people, those who were involved in the revolt. So as I told that in the first one is the first attack from Calcutta into North India, and the next attack from Punjab, right? So this this attack had started in Delhi early in June 1857, right? But it was only the late September that the city was finally captured. The fighting was losses of both sides were heavy, right? So however, it's the British had taken some important steps to stop as well as to kill the people, but however, it's the steps had been taken in the early June 1857, but it all happened in September, which means the five cities are finally captured on September. So finally the fighting losses had happened both sides heavy, right? So one reason for this fact, the rebel all from the North India had come to Delhi to defend capital. So all the people, those who were involved in the rebel from the north side, they all started arriving to come to Delhi to depend on their capital, right? So in the genetic plan to the progress of the British conquest was slow. The first had to conquer the area village by village. So this was another step which was taken by the British, that the forces of the British troops wanted to conquer village by village by killing the people as well as to attacking the people, right? So this step was difficult for the troops to attack as well as to conquer village by village, right? So the countryside and the people around were entirely hostile. As soon as they began their counter-insurgency operation, the British realized that they were not dealing with a mere mutiny but an uprising, that they had huge popular support. So as soon as they cannot control their population of the Indian sepoys, so as soon as they started the new encounters and the new operations to destroy the people as well as to make the revolt be calm, and after that the British thought that this is not a small matter to console the people to stop the rebel, but here it has a huge popular support of the Indian sepoys as well as both men and women. So it's very difficult to solve the problem, right? So after that, in Awadh, for example, the British officials called Forzit, right? The British officials of Awadh are called Forzit. They have estimated that 3/4 of the adult male in the Indian population are involved in the rebellion, right? Not on 3/4 of the Indian population, especially male adult, are involved in the population. So that's what it's very difficult to control, and finally they have control in March 1858 after the big fighting, right? So after that the British used military power on the gigantic scale. But this was not only the instrument they used. In large parts, the present days Uttar Pradesh, where the big landlords and the peasants are offered united resistance, the British tried to break up the unity by promising to give back their big landlords in their estates. So here, Another gigantic scale has been, gigantic ideal thoughts has been introduced by the British is nothing but to tempt the landlords as well as the peasants to promise them to give back their estates which was seized by the British. So after the promising of landlords, after the promising to the landlords and the peasants, here the rebel of the landlords were disposed, and also the peasants, but finally here many landlords died fighting with the British, or they have escaped into the Nepal where they died of illness or starvation, right? So here as we know that the British had taken different steps to dissolve the problem of rebel 1857, right?